get down to like the final 3 seconds, and the guy behind me goes, "Man, Bears haven't been 5-2 in God 20 years. I can't believe we're going to be 5-2." And I'm sitting there and I'm like, "Don't say anything. Don't say anything. Don't say anything. One play left." And well, lo and behold, Hail Mary happens. We're on like the 5-yard line. Happens right in front of us, and then just chaos. Insanity in the stands. This guy's like just pulls his hat over his head. He's like, "I cannot believe that." And we're walking out. My son goes, "Dad, this is the greatest memory we've ever had together."
Phone lines are going crazy at 301-230-0980. And we're taking your calls. Very simple question. What was your favorite Commanders memory of 2024? Not only the moment, but how you lived it. Story time. I'm excited to hear it here on the Team 980. And let's get things rolling with Brian in Alexandria. Brian, get us rolling. What was your favorite moment of 2024? Why and how did you experience it?
What's up, Craig? Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I got you, bro.
So Saturday night playing Detroit Lions, I have a 13-year-old son and a 10-year-old son. 13-year-old son has been a Bills fan all his life, and all Daddy wanted for Christmas every year was to become a Redskin fan. Lost hope that would happen. So anyway, we draft Jayden Daniels, and he becomes a fan. So we're watching the game Saturday night, but he's watching it upstairs on a different TV. And when we got the pick six, he made a sound that I've never heard him make before, so I didn't know what the heck was going on. I wanted to run upstairs to make sure he was okay, but Goff is about to snap the ball, so I stay downstairs for one more play. I see the pick six, and I quickly realize, oh, snap. He's screaming because of what happened. So every good play after that, on his time, he would see the play and, just this squeal would come out, and I knew on my side something good was going to happen. So it just went the rest of the night. I let him stay upstairs, kind of took me off edge, took my nerves out because I knew when I hear that squeal, something good was about to happen on my screen. Never felt anything like it. It was awesome.
That is an incredible story, Brian. So you didn't either go up and join him or make him come down. You're just like, nope, this setup is working. We can't mess with the vibe. We can't mess with the juju.
Craig, I've been nervous watching Redskins game all my life. I said, you know what? I'm going to let him stay, and his squeal will be my preview that I can just relax and know something good is happening.
That's a lot of squeals on that Detroit game. Hey, man, that's an awesome story. Thanks so much for sharing it. Really appreciate that, Brian.
Thank you.
Let's go to Sean in Annapolis. Sean, what was your favorite Commanders memory in 2024, and how did you experience it?
I had so much joy this year. Thinking about back in '83 when I was 10 years old, and I'm ripping up cards of Darryl Green and Joe Theismann, and just crying in my room. And this was such a great year. From spending the time watching the Hail Mary with my dad, who's since passed on December 16th. But I'm not even going to use that one because Greg just reminded me of my boys who I have. My two oldest is 28 and 22, and neither one of them has really seen the Skins do what they've been doing. And so I remember the Carolina game. Any game I didn't go to in person, we'd watch in our garage, and all the boys would come over. My son came over, and we decided that game that every touchdown that they score, not only are we blasting the hell to the Redskins to the entire neighborhood, but we're also drinking. And he was drinking. We were doing a shotgun, and I couldn't wait till Mariota would stop scoring because I drank a little too much that game. But just the joy on my kid's face throughout this year has been fantastic. Thanks for letting me join today.
Yeah, absolutely, man. That's awesome. I love that you got that moment with your kids, and sorry for the loss on your pops, and hope you and your family are doing well. Let's go to, oh man, we got another rooster. There's a rooster in the hallway. There's a rooster in Hagerstown. Rooster, what's going on, man? What's your favorite Commanders memory of 2024, and how did you experience it?
I am the real rooster. The other rooster, well, I'm not going to talk about him. But anyway, so my favorite one all year was the Hail Mary, right?
I'm sitting in my house. I'm all messed up. I've got neck problems, whatever, and I'm really down, whatever. And Jayden throws that ball, and my 22-year-old son's there, and he's not a Redskin fan. And when they scored that touchdown, my son looks at me with tears in his eyes, and he comes over and hugs me and says, "Dad, they're finally going to do something." But my second one, again, my son's there, my 22-year-old son, and I'm down. It's the Dallas game, and I'm really fussing, and I'm really upset about what's going on. And he hits Terry for that long 50, whatever it was, touchdown, even though we lost the game. But my son once again looks at me with tears in his eyes and says, "Dad, it's magic. This Washington team is finally coming back." But anyway, yeah, just wanted to share that with you. But I'm the real rooster. Your co-partner isn't a rooster. He's a chicken.
Rooster, thanks for the call. Thanks for
Thank
sharing
you.
the memories. And razzing Chris Russell, who is 1,000% within my eyesight right now out in the hallway. He may have been in the control room at the start of that call and perhaps heard himself being razzed, but that's fine. 301-230-0980. We got some phone lines open for folks that want to get in line. We got a couple calls on deck here as well. I'll get back to those in a moment. But since the Rooster in Hagerstown mentioned it, my favorite memory, and I might have said this at some point, but I'll give you mine real quick because I will never forget this as long as I live. My favorite is the Terry touchdown against Dallas. And I realize that the context of that we now know about that, where they went up losing that game and it gets ruined 5 seconds later, and the end of that game is a nightmare. Eckler gets concussed. Like, all the stuff that happens around it sucks. But that moment was the moment where all things were possible. Where the week before, we're in that stadium, and for me, I'm in that press box. And Jayden hits the Hail Mary, and I certainly remember that, right? The feeling you get of like, wow, this play before, that feels significant. The fact that they just got into Hail Mary range feels significant. These things don't happen and then just are not important. And so they get the 12 yards, the 20 yards, whatever it was on the quick out. They get out of bounds. And then Jayden throws, runs around forever, and you're like, oh my God, if this thing happens, this is so insane. And then it falls into Noah Brown's hands, and I just remember immediately getting on my keyboard and typing in all caps, ha 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 ha, because that's the kind of analysis you can expect from me. And so I like do that, and I remember distinctly the person I like made eye contact with was David Aldridge, which is the kind of thing you remember because he's David freaking Aldridge. And he's in the Hall of Fame, and he's David Aldridge. And so I remember David and I just looking at each other, laughing maniacally. And then we ultimately wind up walking out down the hall together. We're taking videos, all the fans celebrating in the corridors and all of that. And then so the next time we're in that stadium is that Dallas game. And I just remember he hits Terry. Terry gets loose up the sideline, and you're going, oh my God. This cannot be happening. And looking at David, and David looking at me, and just maniacally laughing. Because what the hell else are you supposed to do at that point? And that was the point that was such a breakthrough, that it was like, this kid is different. There's just something magical about him. And now it's wearing off on Terry, and it's wearing off on this team. And if this is our lives for the next decade, how lucky are we? After all of the bad things that have happened for this team, this franchise, this fan base, those of us that cover it, how lucky are we now that this looks to be our present and future? So, yeah, the Terry touchdown against Dallas, and that just visceral, in a good way, distinct feeling was my favorite moment of the year in the actual moment. And watching Terry, because of where we were, the press box is the end zone away from where Terry was running to, and you could just kind of see it happening. Like, as soon as he caught it and makes one move, you're like, oh, that Mamma Jam is gone. Never forget it. Never forget it. More calls coming, but a couple lines open at 301-230-0980. Let's go to Carl in D.C. Carl, what was your favorite moment of 2024, and why, and how did you experience it?
Well, yeah, what's up, Craig? How are you?
I'm good, Carl. Oh, Kari. Sorry, my bad. I read the screen wrong. My bad, Kari.
It's all good. I would say my favorite was the second Eagles game, and I'll try to keep it short. So even through the Hail Mary, all the other miraculous finishes, including the Cincinnati game, I was still kind of in disbelief to like, this is sustainable, this is who we are. And I was actually in Philly at one of my boys' cribs for the start of the game where we just didn't start off well. I think we had the first 2 turnovers. So I was listening to the game, coming down 95 to head back to the city. And I get home, I think by the time I got home, it was maybe 5 minutes left in the fourth, so now we're in striking distance. And then for me, that's when the cardiac commanders started. Like, I'm looking at my watch on my Fitbit, my heart rate is at 119, 123, 125. And I had like this, oh, shoot moment. I actually care about this team again. And it was the first time. I'm 31 years old, and I've watched the team. It's been my favorite team. Football's my favorite sport. But I haven't really cared because there was no reason to care. And I was like, oh, shoot, I care again. So every single game for the next however many was 7 weeks, I would take a picture of my heart rate on my Fitbit at the end of the games and post it on Instagram and tagging the Cardiac Commanders because it was consistently 100 plus. And I was like, oh, shoot, I care. I feel about this team again. And it's such an amazing experience that I've never had.
Gary, that speaks to me on a visceral level as someone who is a fitness nerd and has multiple heart rate monitors on at pretty much all times. I love that. That is a fantastic story. Also, I'm jealous that you got down 95 within one football game. That is exceptional work out of you / lucky, and you may need to slow down a little bit. So there's also that. But thanks for the call, dude. That was a great story. I really appreciate it. We are taking your calls this hour on your favorite memory of the 2024 Washington Commanders season. Not just what is it, but why was it special to you, and how did you experience that moment? I said mine was the touchdown that Terry scored against Dallas late. In the moment, obviously, the context of that gets a little more complicated once the rest of the plays happen, including the extra point. But just that feeling in that moment of, wow, this team is capable of anything. And looking at David Aldridge, the Hall of Famer, and just being like, can you believe this? And when David Aldridge, who's seen everything, goes, nope, I was like, good enough for me. Good enough for me, DA. What was yours? 301-230-0980. Let's go to KP in DC. KP, what was your favorite moment of 2024 and why, and how did you live it?
Hey, what's up, Craig? Hey, I'm glad you're doing this because I think this is a great opportunity for us to remember that sports is entertainment. It's an opportunity, to make us feel the brotherhood and the fellowship and these moments that matter. And for me, it happened this year. We had a whole bunch of family and friends that do a ski trip out to Deep Creek every year. This was planned 9 months ago. Little did I know, it was the same weekend that our Redskins, our Commanders, are going to be playing their second playoff game of the season. And so to have our family and friends there, of course, we're all drunk as hell, having a hell of a time, celebrating, seeing them kick the Detroit Lions' ass was definitely a moment that mattered to me.
That's awesome. I just can imagine you guys up in a mountain house somewhere being like, let's go. Let's see what happens. And, boy, what happened that night was a whole lot of fun. KP, thanks for sharing that. Appreciate it. For me, that game was also fun because I was actually in South Carolina at my parents' house for that one because my wife just got a new job and we kind of had to decide, like, okay, we really need to go see my parents and my grandmother. They're down in South Carolina. Do we go or do we book flights and risk the Commanders still being in the playoffs? Because that's when Rachel was going to be in between her jobs. And we decided that was the best time for her. She wasn't really going to be able to travel otherwise, where I could just, if God forbid they won, or God willing they won, I would just do my show from Greenville. And I would set up a podcast studio in my dad's office, who retired in December. Hey, Dad, save the desk, save the extra monitor. I might need a space to do some stuff. And so I just, that's one of the funny memories for me for 2024 is it's midnight. I'm in and it's not the house I grew up in, so it's a little bit different. That would have been an even funnier bit if I was in my childhood bedroom. But I'm in my dad's office in my parents' house in South Carolina doing the instant reaction Take Command show. It's the first instant reaction show I ever did solo because we've always had an extra guest or Logan's been able to do it or whatever. And just, I didn't even know what was coming out of my mouth for 40 minutes of talking. But I went back and listened to it. It was a good show. Apparently I did a good enough job. People liked it. But it's kind of a wacky bit because I was like, all right, I guess I'm doing stuff from down there. Bring all the equipment, and thankfully, podcast equipment's a lot more accessible and easier to carry than it used to be. So was able to do that quite nicely. Let's see, what else we got? Let's go to Will in Columbia, who's got a unique one. Will, what was your favorite moment of the 2024 Commanders season and why?
Craig, well, it just happened. Frankie Louvu, NFC Championship game, jumping over the pile multiple times, to let those guys know that we are no longer doormats. They tried to push us from the 5.
Yeah. I mean, it was like the 2 or 3 yard line, I think it started. I will say, on a purely functional thing, the thing that was kind of bad about what Frankie did was, like, you might not get in from the 2, which is where they started, or the 2.5. But when you do the half the distance thing a couple times, well, now there's basically no shot of stopping it. But I guess they were going to do it multiple times anyway.
I mean, yeah, they were, and the game was already out of control because we just kept fumbling the ball away.
There's also that.
So at that point, I just think the frustration hit in, and it was like, okay, well, I know we're not going to win this game, but I'm not going to sit here and let them keep doing this to us. They're going to have to call something else. And I want Jalen Hurst to remember that I'm coming over the pile again. So Jalen kept backing up, and that was hilarious.
No, that's a good one. I appreciate the ingenuity, the creativity, and what it means going forward. Will, thanks for sharing that. Let's go to Brian in Hagerstown. Brian, thanks for calling. You're on the Hoffman Show. What was your favorite memory for the Commanders in 2024? Why, and how'd you live it?
Well, this one's kind of funny because I actually didn't see the memory, but like a lot of the callers, I have a daughter that was born a month after their last Super Bowl in 1992. And so she's never seen a season like this, but she was at our house that day. Her and my wife were wrapping gifts down in the basement, and I was kind of watching her dog in the second Philly game. So when Jayden threw the interception with about 3 minutes left, I got mad, took her dog for a walk. And when I walked back into the garage, I heard my daughter yell, "Yeah, baby." So I opened the door. I said, "Should I come in?" And they said no. So which I knew meant that they had just won the game.
That's incredible. So when did they let you back in the house? Like once the game was over, zeros on the clock, and then they had to tell you? But like, how did you find out about what ultimately is your favorite memory?
Exactly. I just kind of, I was like, oh my God, they must have taken the lead or scored. So I just waited a few minutes in the garage, and they came out and said they won. And it made it even better because I have an obnoxious brother-in-law that's a Philly fan. So
got to rub it in.
That was good.
Got a moment with your daughter. That's no notes. Brian Hagerstown, excellent work. Thanks for sharing that. That is really great. Let's go to Joe in Silver Spring. Joe, I understand the second Eagles game is also your favorite memory. Why and how did you experience it?
First of all, I just want to say, Craig, you have an amazing show. You really have the best show on the sports network in this area. So thank you for all you do.
Thank you, Joe. I appreciate that.
I started absolutely. I wanted to start by saying Danny Rouillet on the other show said this too, that he couldn't stop laughing. I think after the Detroit game, after the Hail Mary, of course after we screamed and hugged, I walked out of that stadium and I was just in hysterics, and I was shocked at my reaction, but I could not stop laughing, and I really have not stopped laughing since. Well, not during the games. During the games, I'm pacing and muttering and cursing and praying and doing things. But at the end of the game, I've been laughing this entire season, and it's been just brilliant. But at the Eagles game, after the muttering and cursing and praying, having to see the Eagles fans walk out dejected was so brilliant. It was just a memory that I'll cherish forever. We don't get those very much, or we haven't in the last 20 years. So that was a wonderful memory for me too.
Yeah, no, that's a great one, Joe. And like that was kind of, I think, a really fun and unique thing for me this year was, so I hadn't been, I think we talked about this on the show. I hadn't been to a game Washington won at home in years. One, there weren't a lot of options. They have been terrible at home for basically the entire Ron Rivera era. Their best year under Rivera was the COVID year, so nobody was there. I was not on the beat then, so I guess some reporters were there, but I was not one of them. The last season I covered on the beat was 2019. They were god-awful all season. So it had been, they started that year 0-6. They eventually won something when Callahan was the head coach. I don't even remember, but it was literally pre-pandemic the last time that I had gone to a game because I was doing some studio stuff or I wasn't covering the team at all or I was, all the different ways that I hadn't gone to home games. And then they were so bad at home last year that I think the only game they won at home maybe was the opener against Arizona, and I was sick that day, so I couldn't go. It had literally been since before the pandemic that I saw home games where the home fans left happy. And to be able to walk out of that stadium so many times and see just hordes and hordes of burgundy and gold clad people who were joyous to see the drum line out there right outside the press box, letting people in, people hooting and hollering, singing the fight song, the whole deal. That was so much fun for me. And then to carry that joy down into the locker room, talk to the players after that Philly game, getting to talk to J-Mo. And I'll say the other thing about the Philly game that I will never forget is I had a chance to talk one-on-one with Terry after that game. And it happened at first out of a moment of frustration. I got shut out of the press conference. I was not happy with the Commanders' PR staff. I love you guys. If you're listening, look at all the joy I'm spreading right now. Thumbs up. But I got shut out of that press conference. And the question I wanted to ask was about Terry setting or tying at that point the touchdown record. And I have known Terry since his rookie year because I was still on the beat then. And as he's walking off the press conference, I was like, hey, man, congratulations. Did you even know you set this record? He's like, no. And we started talking about it a little bit. And I was like, I'm pretty sure he wants to talk about this. And so I went to the PR staff and was like, look, Terry, if he's cool with it, can we do an interview about this one-on-one? And they were like, yeah, no, that's cool. Terry was very gracious with his time, and we talked for about 5 minutes, which is an interview that we played on the show. If you missed it, it's really great. You can go find it in our podcast feed. Just search Terry McLaurin, Craig Hoffman, or on YouTube. If you search the same thing, it should pop up the first result. And we talked about that record and just that moment. Jameson, a guy that I covered from the time he was a rookie and through his entire first stint on the beat. So that Philly game will always be special to me personally. Not only getting to see the comeback happen and beating a good team and all the things that had to go right, considering all the things that went wrong, all 5 of the turnovers, but those moments in the locker room with J-Mo and with Terry specifically are the kinds of things that are on the career highlight reel, frankly, for me. Let's go to Alex in Bethesda. Alex, thanks for calling. You are on the Hoffman Show. What was your favorite memory? Why? And tell me the story.
Thanks, Craig. Yeah, so I'm at the Hail Mary game, the Bears game, with my son, and he's 23, and so he's only seen he's grown up with miserable Redskins for his whole life. I got all the glory years, and we're there at the game, and there's this Bears fan behind us, and we're kind of chirping back and forth, but fun, good-natured stuff. It's not nobody's throwing beers, everybody's having fun. Well, they scored. There's 30 seconds left. And then, we get down to the final 3 seconds. And the guy behind me goes, man, Bears haven't been 5-2 in, 20 years. I can't believe we're going to be 5-2. And I'm sitting there and I'm like, don't say anything. Don't say anything. Don't say anything. One play left. And, well, lo and behold, Hail Mary happens. We're on the 5-yard line. Happens right in front of us. And then just chaos, insanity in the stands. This guy's just pulls his hat over his head. He's like, I cannot believe that. And we're walking out. My son goes, Dad, this is the greatest memory we've ever had together.
Oh, that's awesome.
It was just so great. So great on so many fronts. So anyway, wonderful season. Knocking on the door, but what a great game that was.
No doubt about it. And I hope at some point in his life that man gets to figure out what it feels like when the Bears are 5-2.
That's right.
That's right. All right, Alex, thanks for sharing. That's awesome. Let's go to Robert in Laurel. Robert, I understand the Hail Mary was also your favorite. Tell me your version of events and why it meant so much.
Yes. I was at a bar restaurant in Columbia, Maryland, Victoria's Pub. I had my entire family there, my daughter with her husband, who was a Patriots fan, but turned into a Commanders fan. And I had all kinds of friends there, probably 100 people in the bar area. And we just saw Redskins about to go down against the Bears. And then we're all watching. And when we saw that Hail Mary pass and that catch in the end zone, everybody erupted. The entire place erupted. It was so much unity. People running around table to table, slapping high fives. We're hugging people we don't even know. It was just a sense of unity that I hadn't seen since the Super Bowl days. It was fantastic. And to me, it marked like the beginning of the miracle finishes for me.
No doubt about it. There was just a sense that like, oh, there's something going on here. And the fact that you got to experience that with all those people, Robert's a great story. I love that. Thanks so much for sharing. Let's go to Alan in Rockville. Alan, what was your favorite memory of the season, and what was your version of events? How did you experience it?
It was the Hail Mary, of course. It flipped the whole season, but it's how it got there, because I had experienced the exact opposite back in a long time ago, because all I know is it was at RFK. I was on the 40-yard line, and back then it was during the blackout, so everybody came to every game, so you knew everybody. So it is fourth and about 14, and the Dallas had the 4th and 14. They're down by 4 points, and they're on their own 35-yard line. So everybody is celebrating. So they call the play, they drop into prevent defense, and Staubach throws to Dan Reeves. No, it was Dan Reeves who was the quarterback. Let me take it back further. Dan Reeves throws over the middle. It was Dandy Don, quarterback. He throws it to Dan Reeves coming out of the backfield. He winds his way through the entire Washington team and scores a touchdown. It was like opening an airlock. Everything went from hysteria to dead space silence. Everybody turned, was walking out, somber, quiet as a mouse. That's why this one was so different. And you can see what that is seared into my memory, because it was so unbelievable. And the Chicago fans are going to feel like this for years.
That's awesome. That's a great story. Thanks so much for sharing that, Alan. Let's go to Kelly in Hyattsville. Kelly, what was your favorite memory of the 2024 Washington season, and why?
Hey, Craig. Yeah, so mine's more personal. You know, I've been a fan a long time, almost 60 years, and I kept telling my son, you never seen the city turned up as to when this team is good. And so when the tickets were cheap against Carolina, I was able to buy tickets for me and my five of my sons. And we sat up in the nosebleeds, almost the standing room only. And so when Dante Fowler scooped up, I don't know if it was a fumble or a tip pass or something like that, early in the game, and ran it back towards our end zone for a touchdown, and the crowd just went crazy. Being able to experience that with my sons who've never experienced anything like that, never been to a game, it was like the transfer of that love to the next generation. So I'm thankful for the team just building a team that was that, you know, we all could be proud to root for. But that was my favorite memory.
Kelly, that's a beautiful story. I love that. I'm glad you got to experience that with your family. Thanks for sharing that with us, man. Appreciate it. All right, that's the end of the calls. That was a great hour of radio. I, for one, thoroughly enjoyed that, and hope all you did too. It sounds like a lot of folks did. And I think what Kelly captures there at the end is so beautiful, because it reminds us why sports exist in the way that they do in American culture, and really world culture. They literally bring cities together, and like what Alan was talking about at the bar, and you know, even what some of the other folks are talking about with taunting Chicago fans, as long as it's good natured and we don't go full Philadelphia Eagles fans on people. We don't never go full Eagles fans on people. But I was looking at Instagram in the break, and an architectural firm has apparently put out a rendering of what the new stadium could look like at the RFK site. And it is beautiful. And just the idea of people being able to come together there. And also, there's this scene in this movie that this firm puts out where it's not a game day and you got people in this big green area outside the stadium. And I think it's really cool because it kind of symbolizes the idea that you can have this thing, this place that people go to be a center of a community where there's a unity. And like, I know this is a little cheesy and it's a little whatever, but specifically in DC. And I realize also, like, the district itself, you're not actually amongst district residents crossing a lot of party lines. The idea that you're bringing right and left together, you're crossing the aisle at Commanders games is a little silly if you know the percentages in which DC votes red or blue. But if you think about the area writ large, there are certainly red areas of the DMV, and there are blue areas of the DMV. And what has been true in the past is that gets thrown out for burgundy and gold on Sundays. And if this team can help this area, especially because now I think, and I'm not saying this just, in the new administration, but generally speaking, when you have the transient nature of DC, right? There's so many people that change over from the people that actually work in government to the contractors and the kinds of folks that go in and out, because the city, ultimately, the biggest driver of business is the federal government. But if you have something that those of us that live here that don't exist in that world, that exists outside of that world, that we just live here because we live here. Our parents are from here, or in my case, I love it here and have taken to the town. My wife works in an industry that, sure, there's a government adjacency to it, but just like we're a big American city. And so big law and big, these consulting firms and advertising firms, like a lot of people have offices here, and we're not going to move based off of the government at any given time. And to have something for all of us collectively to call our own that we can be proud of is really great. And we get to experience these moments together and get reminded of our common humanity. Like, that is the best of sports. And so the Commanders gave us so many of those moments this year, and reliving them with all of you in such an incredibly human way as you tell us about your families and that incredibly, undeniably human thing. That was a good way to spend an hour of radio on a Wednesday. So thanks to all of you who called in. I really appreciate it.
This is the Hoffman Show on the T980 and the Odyssey app.